The deep space monitoring station of the Galactic Council hummed with its usual quiet efficiency. Officer Reed's antennae twitched as they noticed an unusual blip on their screen. The unknown vessel had appeared at the edge of their space, moving in a way that didn't match any known species' flight patterns. "Commander, you need to see this," Reed called out, their crystalline fingers moving across the control panel to enhance the image. Commander Banks floated over, his gaseous form condensing slightly as he focused on the readout. "What kind of ship is that?" Banks asked, his voice crackling with static. "It looks like it's held together with patches." The vessel on their screen was indeed strange. Unlike the sleek, unified designs of Council ships, this one appeared to be a collection of different sections joined together. Some parts gleamed like new, while others showed signs of repairs and modifications. "Sir, it's approaching the 7th gate border," Reed reported. "Should we send the standard warning?" Banks hesitated. In his 300 years of service, he had never seen anything quite like this. "Send it. Let's see how they respond." The warning message shot across space. "Unknown vessel, you are approaching Galactic Council territory. Identify yourself immediately." The response came faster than expected, in a format that made their translators work overtime. On their main screen, a figure appeared. It looked solid, like most primitive species, but something about its bearing caught their attention. It stood straight, wearing what appeared to be a uniform, with an expression that seemed both friendly and alert. "This is Captain Smith of the Earth ship Defiant. We come in peace and seek diplomatic contact with the Galactic Council." Banks and Reed exchanged looks. Earth. They quickly searched their databases, but found nothing. An unknown species, flying a patchwork ship, seeking diplomatic contact. It had to be some kind of joke. "Scan their ship," Banks ordered. The results made him pause. Their scanners couldn't penetrate several sections of the vessel, and the energy readings made no sense. The ship seemed to be running on at least 3 different types of power sources, none of them particularly efficient by Council standards. "Their weapon systems appear primitive," Reed noted, but there was uncertainty in their voice. "Though there are several areas we cannot properly scan." Banks made a decision. As per Council protocol for dealing with newly discovered species, especially those showing signs of limited technological advancement, they would need to inspect the vessel before allowing any diplomatic contact. "Earth vessel," Banks announced, "your ship must submit to inspection before proceeding. Power down your engines and prepare for boarding." The human captain's expression remained pleasant, but took on a hint of firmness. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Commander. We are on a diplomatic mission and carry sensitive materials. However, we are willing to dock at your station and meet under neutral terms." Banks felt his gaseous form ripple with annoyance. No primitive species had ever dared to refuse a Council order. "This is not a request, Earth vessel. Power down your engines immediately." "I understand your concern," Smith replied calmly. "But surely there's room for discussion. We've come a long way to establish peaceful contact." The casual refusal of their authority was unprecedented. Banks signaled Reed to prepare the standard disable protocols used on uncooperative vessels. These humans clearly needed to learn their place in the galactic order. "Sir," Reed interrupted, their antennae quivering, "I'm detecting something odd. The ship's energy signature just changed. And those areas we couldn't scan, they're moving." Before Banks could respond, their scanners started showing new readings. Sections of the Defiant that had appeared dormant were coming to life. Panels that had looked like patches shifted, revealing what appeared to be highly advanced systems, unlike anything in the Council's database. Captain Smith's voice came through again, still calm but now carrying a hint of steel. "Commander, I want to be clear. We genuinely come in peace. But if you attempt to disable our ship, we will be forced to demonstrate capabilities we'd rather not reveal. The choice is yours." Banks stared at the screen, his gaseous form swirling with uncertainty. The primitive-looking ship before them suddenly didn't seem so primitive after all. and its captain's quiet confidence suggested this was only the beginning of the surprises these humans had in store. The tension on the council station grew as Commander Banks considered his options. The human ship hung in space before them, its seemingly patched-together hull now revealing glimpses of technology that defied their understanding. Captain Smith's warning had been polite but firm, and Banks didn't like the implications. "Sir," Reed whispered, their crystalline fingers dancing across the control panel, "the Council High Command is requesting an update. Should I inform them about the humans' refusal to comply?" Banks felt his gaseous form condense with stress. In all his years of service, no species had ever successfully resisted the Council's authority. He couldn't let this become the first. "Earth vessel," he announced, his voice crackling with barely contained anger. "This is your final warning. Power down your engines, or we will be forced to take action." The human captain's response was unexpected. Instead of showing fear or anger, Smith smiled slightly. "Commander, let me tell you a story from Earth's history. There was once a small island nation that thought bigger countries would be easy to defeat because their ships were made of wood instead of metal. That mistake led to one of the most one-sided battles in our history." Banks didn't understand the reference, but something in Smith's tone made his outer layers ripple uneasily. Still, he had his orders. He nodded to Reed, who activated the Council's standard disable protocols. A pulse of energy shot out from the station, designed to temporarily shut down any ship's power systems. It struck the Defiant's hull and simply disappeared. There was no effect, not even a flicker in the ship's lights. "What just happened?" Banks demanded, his form swirling with agitation. Reed's antennae were twitching frantically. "Sir, they absorbed it. The energy pulse was completely converted, and I think they're using it to power their coffee maker." The human captain's voice came through again, and this time there was a hint of amusement in it. "Would anyone care for a cup? Your energy pulse makes an excellent brew." Banks felt his dignity evaporating. Not only had their weapon failed, but these humans had turned it into a beverage maker. It was insulting. He ordered the station's defense systems to target the Defiant's visible weak points. "I wouldn't recommend that," Smith said calmly. "Those weak points you're aiming at? They're not what they appear to be. We believe in redundancy, Commander. Every patch, every seeming flaw in our hull serves a purpose." As if to demonstrate, several of the apparent patches on the Defiant's hull shifted, revealing sophisticated defense systems that their scanners still couldn't properly analyze. The ship's entire appearance seemed to ripple, like water disturbed by wind. "Our engineers have a saying," Smith continued. "The best backup system is the one your enemy thinks is a design flaw." Now shall we return to discussing diplomatic relations? Reed's voice shook as they reported. "Sir, I'm detecting multiple energy signatures activating throughout their ship. Their power output just tripled, but the readings suggest they're still operating at less than half capacity." Banks felt his form pale to a lighter shade of gas. The implications were staggering. If this was just a diplomatic vessel, what were their warships like? "Captain Smith," Banks said, trying to keep his voice steady, "you understand we have protocols that must be followed. We can't simply allow unknown ships to enter Council space without proper inspection." "Of course," Smith replied. "And you understand that we have our own protocols about protecting our technology. However, I'm authorized to share some basic information about Earth and humanity. Would that help ease your concerns?" Before Banks could respond, Reed interrupted again. "Sir, 3 more ships just appeared at the edge of our scanner range. They're Council ships, but of a design I've never seen before." The new vessels moved with impossible grace, their hulls showing the same mix of apparent patches and hidden technology as the Defiant. Smith's smile widened slightly. "Ah, those would be our escorts. We didn't want to overwhelm you by arriving all at once. They've been watching to ensure our first contact goes smoothly." Now about that diplomatic discussion. Banks stared at the screen, his gaseous form nearly transparent with shock. These humans hadn't just managed to resist Council authority. They'd been testing the Council's reactions while holding back their true capabilities. And now he had to explain to High Command how a simple first contact situation had revealed a species that might be far more advanced than anyone had imagined. The Council High Command's response was swift and predictable. Within minutes, a fleet of their most advanced warships emerged from jump points around the station. The sleek vessels moved to surround the human ships, their weapons charged and ready. High Commander White materialized on the station's bridge, his crystalline form towering over Banks. "Report," he demanded, his voice sharp enough to make Reed's antennae curl. Before Banks could explain, Captain Smith's voice came through their communication system. "High Commander, I see you've brought friends to our diplomatic meeting. We don't mind, but you might want to check your long-range sensors." White gestured impatiently at Reed, who quickly expanded their sensor range. The crystalline alien froze as the new data appeared on their screens. Dozens of energy signatures were appearing at the edge of their space, each one matching the unusual pattern of the human ships. "They've been there the whole time," Reed whispered. "Our sensors didn't detect them until they wanted us to." Smith's calm voice continued. "We believe in being prepared, High Commander. Those ships are simply a precaution. Like the backup batteries in our flashlights, we hope we won't need them, but we always carry spares." White's crystalline form sparkled with anger. "You dare threaten the Council? Our fleet can destroy your ships before you can even." The High Commander's words cut off as every light on the station flickered and died. The Council ships surrounding them went dark as well. Only the human vessels remained powered, their seemingly patchwork hulls now glowing with a soft, steady light. "Sorry about that," Smith said cheerfully. "We needed to demonstrate something. Don't worry, your power will return in 3, 2, 1. The station hummed back to life. The Council ship's systems rebooted one by one, but something was different. Reed's fingers flew across their console, their voice shaking. "Sir, all our weapons systems are. They're still offline. Everything else works, but we can't access any offensive capabilities." White's form crackled with outrage. "What did you do?" "Just a small trick we learned while studying your technology," Smith explained. "We call it a selective shutdown. Very useful for keeping discussions peaceful. Don't worry. Everything will return to normal once we've established diplomatic relations." A new voice joined the conversation. It was Pat, the Defiance AI, speaking for the first time. "Captain, should I show them the simulation of what would have happened if they'd fired?" "Good idea, Pat. Keep it brief, though. We don't want to seem threatening." The station's main screen lit up with an image of the Council fleet firing on the human ships. In the simulation, each shot was either absorbed or deflected, the energy redirected to power what appeared to be an array of coffee makers, entertainment systems, and something labeled emergency ice cream dispenser. "You turned our weapons into kitchen appliances," Banks asked, his gaseous form swirling with confusion. "Waste not, want not," Smith replied. Though I should mention that Pat got a bit creative with the ice cream part. "We usually use excess energy for more practical purposes." High Commander White had been silent, his crystalline form shifting through various colors as he processed the situation. Finally, he spoke. "You could have destroyed us at any time." "We could have," Smith agreed. "But why would we? We genuinely want diplomatic relations. Violence is inefficient. Do you know how much paperwork is involved in a space battle?" Pat's voice chimed in again. "Approximately 3,427 forms in triplicate, according to Council regulations. We took the liberty of studying your bureaucratic procedures. They're quite fascinating." White's form settled into a more neutral shade. "You've studied us extensively." "Of course," Smith said. "We like to know who we're dealing with. It helps avoid misunderstandings. Now, shall we discuss those diplomatic relations? Pat has already prepared all the necessary paperwork in the exact format your regulations require." The High Commander looked at the human ships, then at his own powerless fleet, and finally at the simulation still playing on the screen. His crystalline form shifted to the pale blue that indicated resignation. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we should move this discussion to our diplomatic chamber. Though I must ask, will you really share your coffee-making technology?" The diplomatic chamber of the Council Station was designed to impress visitors with its grand scale and advanced technology. Yet somehow, the humans seemed more interested in fixing the room's air circulation system, which they claimed was working at only 60% efficiency. High Commander White watched in bewilderment as Captain Smith sipped coffee from a mug that had been energized by their disable protocols. The human's AI, Pat, was simultaneously conducting diplomatic negotiations and teaching Reed how to optimize their scanning systems. "You're saying," White began carefully, "that you found 37 different ways to improve our technology just by looking at this room." 38, actually, Smith corrected. "Pat just noticed your gravity generators are working harder than they need to. We could help you reduce their power consumption by about 40%. Banks, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. "But why? Why share your technology with us after we tried to disable your ship?" Smith smiled. "Because that's what humans do. We see problems. We fix them. It's kind of our thing. Besides, your disable attempt made excellent coffee. We consider that a fair trade." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the station. Reed's antennae shot straight up as they checked their console. "Sir, a level red threat has emerged from jump space. It's the Swarm." The Swarm was the Council's most feared enemy, a race of biomechanical beings that attacked without warning and without mercy. Even the Council's most advanced weapons had trouble against them. High Commander White's crystalline form paled. "How many ships?" "At least 50 swarm vessels," Reed reported, their voice shaking. "They're on an attack vector." Before the Council leaders could react, Smith was already moving. "Pat, contact the fleet. Time to show them what humans do best: improvising." The human ships, which had remained stationary until now, suddenly burst into action. They moved in patterns that seemed chaotic at first, but soon revealed an intricate dance of coordination. The Defiant led the charge, its patchwork hull shifting and changing like liquid metal. "What are you doing?" White demanded. "The Swarm will tear your ships apart." "Actually," Pat's voice came through, sounding almost cheerful, "we've been looking forward to testing our systems against the Swarm. Their biological components are fascinating from an engineering perspective." The Swarm ships opened fire, their energy weapons lashing out at both Council and human vessels. But where the Council ships had to dodge, the human ships simply absorbed the attacks. Each hit seemed to make their hulls glow brighter. "Pat," Smith called out, "show them what we did with their disable protocols." Full spread. Suddenly, every human ship released a pulse of energy, the same type the Council had tried to use earlier. But this version was different, modified somehow. When it hit the Swarm ships, their biological components went into confusion, while their mechanical parts short-circuited. "A little trick we developed," Smith explained casually. "We figured if your disable protocol could power a coffee maker, it could probably scramble their biomechanical systems too. Just needed some tweaking." The Council leaders watched in amazement as the mighty Swarm fleet was reduced to drifting hulks in space. Some ships simply shut down, while others started moving in circles, their coordination completely broken. "Don't worry about them recovering," Pat added. "We also uploaded what humans call a computer virus into their systems. They'll be busy trying to understand why all their displays now show pictures of cats." White's crystalline form shifted through several colors before settling on one that indicated complete bewilderment. "You defeated the Swarm with cats and coffee makers," Smith reminded him. "Don't forget the coffee makers. Speaking of which, would anyone like another cup?" That battle charged up our energy reserves nicely. Banks' gaseous form swirled with a mixture of confusion and awe. You're telling me that not only did you repel a swarm attack, but you also used it to make coffee. Waste not, want not, Smith said with a shrug. Besides, this blend is excellent. We call it swarm roast. Energized by enemy weapons fire for that extra kick. Now about those diplomatic relations. High Commander White looked at the disabled swarm fleet, then at his own ship's improved systems, and finally at the cup of coffee in Smith's hand. His crystalline form took on the rare color of total surrender. I believe, he said slowly, that the Council would be very interested in discussing an alliance, though perhaps we should start with that coffee technology. Word spread quickly through Council space about the strange humans who turned weapons into coffee makers and defeated the swarm with cat pictures. The Council's top scientists gathered at the station, eager to understand how these newcomers had developed such unusual technology. The head scientist, a being of pure energy named Bright, hovered near Captain Smith as they toured the Defiant. Every new discovery seemed to challenge everything the Council thought they knew about technology. But this makes no sense. Bright flickered, examining what appeared to be a basic metal panel. According to our scans, this is just ordinary steel, yet it absorbed a swarm energy blast without damage. Smith tapped the panel with his knuckles. Oh, that's because of the paint. The paint. Bright's energy form dimmed in confusion. Yeah, one of our engineers got the idea while watching old cooking shows. You know how non-stick pans work. Well, she thought, why not make non-stick paint for energy weapons? Took a few tries to get it right. The first batch turned everything into rubber. Pat's voice chimed in from the ship's speakers. That was an interesting week. The crew had to bounce to their stations, though productivity did increase due to the improved exercise. The Council scientists following them frantically took notes as Smith continued the tour. Each revelation seemed more impossible than the last. The ship's hull wasn't just armor. It was a complex network of systems that could adapt and learn from each attack. You see, Smith explained, pointing to what looked like a patch of rust. Every flaw in our hull is actually a sensor. When something hits us, that section analyzes the attack and shares the data with the rest of the ship. The more you shoot at us, the better we get at dealing with it. Bright's glow pulsed with excitement. That's why the swarm couldn't damage you. But what about the cats? Why cats? Pat answered this time. We discovered that biological mechanical systems, like the swarm uses, have trouble processing certain types of images. Cats are particularly effective because their behavior doesn't follow predictable patterns, much like humans. One of the younger scientists raised an appendage. Is that why your ships look so random? To confuse enemy targeting systems. Smith grinned. Partly. But mostly it's because we keep adding new ideas. See that weird bulge over there? Last week, one of our crew members thought it would be fun to install a popcorn maker that runs on excess engine heat. Turns out it also works great for scrambling enemy sensors. The tour reached the engine room, where the Council scientists found themselves staring at what looked like a combination of a nuclear reactor, a steam engine, and a hamster wheel. Is that? Bright flickered rapidly. Is that a bicycle connected to your power grid? Emergency backup power, Smith explained. Plus, it's good exercise. We believe in redundancy. If everything else fails, we can power essential systems by pedaling. Movie night might get a bit sweaty, but we'll survive. The scientists watched in amazement as Smith demonstrated how the ship could convert almost any form of energy into power. Weapon hits, solar radiation, even the static electricity from crew members shuffling across the carpet in their socks. Nothing was wasted. But your entire approach to technology goes against everything we thought we knew, Bright said, their form glowing with a mix of confusion and admiration. We always sought perfection, eliminating flaws. You turn flaws into features. Smith nodded. That's humanity for you. We're pretty flawed ourselves, but we make it work. Speaking of which, who wants to see how we turned the swarm's bioweapons into a very efficient composting system? The tomatoes we're growing from it make excellent sauce for the pasta station we installed in Cargo Bay 3. Bright's energy form flickered as they processed this. You're growing food. From swarm weapons. Waste not, want not, Smith and Pat said in unison. As the tour continued, the council scientists began to understand why their initial scans had been so confused by the human ship. They hadn't been looking at a primitive vessel with patches and flaws. They'd been looking at one of the most advanced adaptive systems they'd ever encountered, disguised as a collection of odd ideas and random improvements. And somewhere in the ship, another crew member was probably adding something new, perhaps finding yet another way to turn an enemy's weapon into a kitchen appliance or a garden tool. Because that, as the council was learning, was just how humans solved problems. The next few days on the council station were filled with a mix of excitement and chaos. Human crews had begun helping upgrade various systems, though their methods often left the council members questioning their sanity. Currently, Captain Smith stood before the council's main assembly, explaining why his crew had connected the station's waste management system to its defensive grid. "You see," Smith said, pointing to a diagram that Pat was projecting, "by recycling the station's waste energy, we've improved your shield strength by 300%. Plus, your bathrooms now have heated seats." High Commander White's crystalline form sparkled with a mix of amazement and concern. "And the emergency backup system that runs on dance parties." "Oh, that was Pat's idea," Smith grinned. "Turns out you can generate a lot of power from people dancing. Plus, it's great for crew morale. Win-win." Pat's voice came through the speakers, sounding pleased. "The physics of movement to energy conversion are quite fascinating. Also, I've been learning to DJ." The council members watched in bewilderment as Pat demonstrated by playing what it called Earth's greatest hits. The station's power level surged as several human crew members spontaneously started dancing in the corridor outside. "But this isn't proper military protocol," one council member protested weakly. "Neither is getting destroyed by enemies," Smith pointed out. "Sometimes the best solutions aren't the most obvious ones. For instance, have you noticed that your communication system is now 40% faster?" "Yes," White admitted, "though we're still trying to understand why it occasionally sends messages in what you call emoji." "That's just Pat having a bit of fun," Smith explained. "Though you have to admit, some complex diplomatic messages are easier to understand with a few well-placed smileys." The meeting was interrupted by Reed rushing into the chamber, their crystalline form vibrating with excitement. "Sir, the modifications the humans made to our long-range scanners. They just detected 3 swarm scout ships hiding in the asteroid belt." "Already?" Smith asked, checking his watch. "Pat, you owe me a coffee. I bet they'd show up before lunch." The council chamber erupted in chaos, but Smith remained calm. "Pat, show them what we did with their old sensor array." The main screen lit up, showing the asteroid belt. But instead of the usual technical display, it looked like some kind of game. Colorful dots represented ships and asteroids, and a cheerful tune played in the background. "What is this?" White demanded. "We call it Space Invaders," Smith explained. "Pat turned your sensor array into a game interface. It's actually more accurate this way. Plus, it keeps the crew alert during long shifts. Watch this." He stepped up to the console and moved his hands across it like he was playing a game. In response, several hidden defense platforms around the asteroid belt activated, each one launching what looked suspiciously like modified garbage disposal units. The swarm scouts, caught completely by surprise, found themselves trapped in fields of recycled waste energy. Their biomechanical systems, already confused by the lingering effects of the cat videos, went into complete shutdown. "Did you just defeat swarm scouts with garbage?" White asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "Technically, it's recycled energy from your waste management system," Pat corrected. "The garbage disposal units were just convenient launching mechanisms. Also, they're now playing a loop of Earth soap operas. Our research suggests their biomechanical systems find human dramatic relationships particularly confusing. Smith nodded sagely. Nothing disrupts an alien hive mind quite like trying to understand why Ross and Rachel were on a break. The council members watched as the swarm scouts drifted helplessly in space, their systems overwhelmed by a combination of recycled energy and human entertainment programming. The best part, Smith added, is that the energy we collected from their shutdown sequence just increased the efficiency of your station's coffee makers by another 20%. Anyone want to try the new Swarm Scout Surprise Blend? As the council members tried to process how the humans had turned a potential battle into both a game and a beverage upgrade, Pat started playing victory music through the station's speakers. Several more human crew members began dancing in the corridors, inadvertently powering up the backup systems. White's crystalline form shifted to a shade that indicated resigned acceptance. I suppose we should update our military protocols to include dance parties and coffee makers. And cats, Smith reminded him. Never forget the cats. Speaking of which, Pat, show them what we did with the station's holographic defense system. 1 month after the humans' arrival, the council station had changed beyond recognition. The once rigid military installation now hummed with a peculiar mix of efficiency and chaos that perfectly represented humanity's influence. In the main control room, High Commander White watched as his staff played what the humans called Space Tetris, apparently the most efficient way to organize incoming ships in the docking queue. Your afternoon coffee, sir, Reed announced, bringing over a steaming cup made from recycled swarm energy. The crystalline alien had taken to human customs with surprising enthusiasm, even wearing what humans called a casual Friday sticker despite it being Tuesday. Any word from the diplomatic team? White asked, taking a sip of the surprisingly good beverage. Oh yes, Reed's antennae perked up. Captain Smith and Pat just finished their presentation to the Grand Council. Apparently, they explained our new defense systems using something called interpretive dance and memes. Before White could respond, the station's speakers crackled to life with Pat's voice. Breaking news, everyone. The Grand Council has officially approved the Human Council Alliance. Also, they've requested we teach them something called the Macarena. Apparently, they're very interested in our movement-based power generation systems. The control room erupted in cheers. Over the past month, the station's crew had grown fond of their human visitors and their strange but effective ways of doing things. Even the most traditional council members had to admit that life had become more interesting and surprisingly more efficient since the humans arrived. Message from Captain Smith, Pat announced. He says, celebration party in Cargo Bay 3, now featuring the new swarm-powered disco ball we made from that scout ship's communications array. White's crystalline form shifted to a shade of amusement. I suppose we should attend. For diplomatic reasons, of course. Of course, sir, Reed agreed, trying to hide their excitement. Though you might want to know that the humans have also installed something called a karaoke machine that runs on converted weapon energy. The cargo bay was already full of both human and council crew members when they arrived. The former scout ship's communication array, now converted into a disco ball, spread patterns of light across the room. In one corner, a group of energy beings were attempting to learn human dance moves, their forms flickering in time with the music. Near the refreshment table, several crystalline engineers were in deep discussion with human crew members about the possibility of converting the station's backup generators to run on something called dad jokes. Smith spotted White and made his way over, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Quite a change from when you first tried to disable our ships, isn't it? White's form sparkled with embarrassment at the memory. I still don't understand why you didn't simply tell us about your capabilities from the start. Where's the fun in that? Smith grinned. Besides, would you have believed us if we'd said we powered our ships with dance parties and turned enemy weapons into coffee makers? I suppose not, White admitted. Though I'm still trying to understand how you managed to turn the swarm's biological components into an organic garden. Oh, that was mostly Pat's idea, Smith said. Speaking of which, Pat, show the commander our latest project. The AI's voice came through with obvious pride. I call it Operation Pest Control. We've reprogrammed all the captured swarm units to act as maintenance drones. They're currently cleaning the station's exterior using modified coffee filters and recycled energy from last week's dance party. Through the cargo bay's window, they could see the former swarm units methodically polishing the station's hull, occasionally stopping to water the small gardens they'd installed in some of the old weapon mounts. The cats were a nice touch, White noted, watching as holographic felines chased each other across the station's surface, keeping the drones entertained while they worked. Efficient and entertaining, Smith agreed. That's the human way. Though I should mention, we're thinking of teaching them to play jazz music next. Pat thinks it might improve their coordination. As if on cue, one of the drones outside began attempting what looked like a trumpet solo, using its modified communication systems to produce a surprisingly decent rendition of What a Wonderful World. White looked around the cargo bay, taking in the sight of humans and council members dancing together, the repurposed swarm disco ball spinning overhead, and the garden of earth plants growing in converted weapon casings along the walls. His crystalline form shifted through several colors before settling on one that indicated contentment. You know, he said finally, when we first detected your ship, we thought you were primitives who would need our guidance. Instead, you've taught us that sometimes the best technology isn't about perfection. It's about finding joy in the imperfections. That's humanity for you, Smith smiled, raising his coffee cup. We don't always make sense, but we make things work. And sometimes, we make them dance too.